There we go. Cool. Every time. Yep. Sweet. Sweet. What's up, guys? Blacklisted Voice, episode 51. Man and I are going to chat a little bit about cutting in the sport, especially for bigger athletes, as we're both kind of a little bit more taller for the sport. And
Heavier.
Yeah. I tell people all the time I'm 235 pounds, and they're like, "You don't look like it." I'm like, "I know, but this number on the scale does not
doesn't
lie unless you have a broken scale."
Yeah.
But when there's like multiple scales telling you that you're 235 pounds, you're 235 pounds.
Yep.
So yeah, Amanda and I guess what inspired the podcast, we saw Amanda Barnhart's cutting this year for the sport, or for her season. She's a little bit taller in the sport as well, 5'7". I think, do you remember how much she weighed before the cut? It was like 175,
something like that.
Yeah, I think at least that's what is listed on her games website, 175. So I would guess that the reason she's doing that is for gymnastics purposes, maybe some conditioning purposes as well. But both Amanda and I have had some experience cutting in the sport, so we just kind of wanted to share our kind of thought processes with it and our like journeys with it, I guess, see if that helped you guys out at all. I know we kind of specialize in coaching a little bit more powerful and bigger athletes, being that we are them ourselves. So, but yeah, so when I started with you, you were on a cut, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And what spurred that kind of like thought process on your, because you did it on your own, right? Well, I'm sorry, you like thought about doing it on your own.
Yeah. And I started with a company for the cut.
Yes. Yeah. So what kind of like spurred that thought process?
I mean, part of it was just, honestly, it was, I mean, as a female, it's partially it's like body image. You always have that.
Right.
But I knew, like, I was starting to feel, that's kind of what I'm going through right now. Like, I was starting to feel heavy in my workouts.
Okay.
With like gymnastics specifically.
Yeah.
And so like, if and when I ever get to that point, I'm like, probably time for like a little bit of a cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like the main reason. Plus it was actually like right at the beginning of like the lockdown of COVID. So it was kind of like a good time to
2020, right?
Yeah.
It was like May of 2020, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we started to get, and I'd been on a cut. I think I started in April. So I'd already been on a cut for a little bit, I think, when I started with you.
Yep.
But yeah, so it was kind of like, it was within that COVID period. And so it was like, well, it's a good time to focus on it since can't really do much else.
There's two ways this could go.
Right. And it was kind of like, everything was out of everyone's control at that point. So I was like, I'll control one thing I can control, and that's like the food I put into my body.
Right.
Plus, like I said, I was just starting to feel heavy, and because I am a bigger athlete in sport, like I currently weigh about 180 pounds, and people's minds are blown when I tell them that.
It's so weird. Yeah, it's weird because like if you look at me specifically, like I don't think like relative to other CrossFitters, especially on the team side of things, like you're like much bigger than them, right? But like if you look at me compared to the other guys on the field, like I'm a fucking monster compared to these guys. And it's like when I tell people how big I am, like I feel like it shouldn't be a shock to them, but they're like, what? Like you weigh that much? Like, yes. Like,
Thank you.
Real confidence booster there. Thanks.
But yeah, so it's just like, when I start to feel heavy in actual training. Yeah. Like, because a lot of like throughout the year, unless I'm working with a nutrition coach, I don't weigh myself. So it's like I really base whether I feel like I should be in a cut based off of like how I'm feeling in my training. Yeah. So that was kind of your first quote unquote cut, right? Yeah. And that lasted from like April to July-ish, right? Very long time. Yeah. And they had you cutting. It was, gosh, it was well into when I moved here, I think. Yeah.
And
so like I moved here in mid-July. So probably, July,
so maybe even August. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember you saying that, like, because I think you were down to like 159, right? Or something like that.
And the coach I was working with at the time was very adamant about getting me sub 160 pounds.
And even when they got you there, they were still telling you to cut.
Yeah.
So
I was like, cool. I got 159. They're going to give me more food. And he did not.
Fuck. Yep. So you kind of stopped that in August. And then what, because your next cut or like tracking, I guess, started happening closer to 2021, like spring of 2021, right? Or like, do you remember the timeline on that?
I went from then, probably like like end of 2020, beginning of 2021.
Yeah, like January, February time
Yeah.
frame. So like what transpired during those like months that you weren't like retracking or cutting or anything like that?
I think what happened, and it just kind of my experience with some of the coaches I've had, was like because I really like had to beg to be out of that cut. So then, and like once it kind of wasn't happening, I dropped that nutrition coach and then like kind of tried to do it on my own. But like, I mean, I know enough about nutrition, but not a ton. So it's just like, I think it kind of like I didn't like refeed my body properly.
Yeah.
So I just kind of like, I don't want to say like ballooned out, but like just kind of like versus instead of going into like a maintenance phase, I went into like an overfeeding phase type of thing.
So it was more for you, like it was like all or nothing type
right
thing.
Because and not that I went like totally off the rails or anything like that, but it was like for a little bit after I was done with them, it was like
freedom.
Yeah, kind of. And then again, it just got to the point where I was feeling heavy again. And then the next cut though was like a lot more. It was a lot healthier. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think because you had kind of like that yo-yo effect, and like the next cut was like you started tracking like January, February, right? Yeah.
And then like kind of started to cut down in like March and April timeframe, right? And then May you were a little bit more on maintenance.
Yeah.
Is that schedule sound about right?
Yeah, like through like the season.
Yeah.
Like post quarterfinals.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And then pretty much have not been doing anything until now, right?
Yeah. And like I think I did it was like right after season the last year where again it wasn't, I mean there was a whole slew of things going on, not just injury, emotion, like there was a whole lot of stuff going on with what happened after season last year. But yeah, it's like I think when I am not like after season, like I think I gained about 10 pounds after season. And that's just, and then once I gained those 10 pounds, I've just kind of been sitting there. I haven't really changed much. And so I think part of it too is just my body being like I think where I'm at kind of right now is just like, if I was just like, if I wasn't trying to be competitive and I was just like working out and like doing my thing, this is kind of where my body would naturally be.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that was my body's way of being like, we're going to sit here for a little bit and like, chill and like get everything more like back in balance type of thing.
I think that's one thing that like I think that's one thing that people miss out on, and it's more prevalent for bigger, more powerful athletes because they're set point. So like a weight set point, right? Like you float around like 175, 180 range. Like I float around 230 to 235 range if I'm exercising.
Yes.
If I'm touching a barbell every day, I'm in between those ranges, and it's really hard for me to get down below that. And so I think that happens normally to CrossFit athletes, but they're just at a smaller stature, and maybe they have different physiology in regards to their muscle mass. Where their stress component isn't to hypertrophy from adaptation, or their adaptation to stress isn't to hypertrophy. It's more to maybe become more enduring or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So their weight set point sits quite a bit lower than something like you or I, where it's like, oh, where you had weightlifting, like, and a lot of it, like, let's put on more muscle mass so that we can move the mass. And it's like, I think it's more prevalent for you or I to have that happen. And I think one thing that people miss out or maybe don't account for is how stressful it is for our bodies to drop below that point and then continue to try and perform. And like, I think there's a cost analysis that you kind of have to play with, is like, okay, getting down below this, is the stress of this going to be beneficial for the athlete? Like, are they going to perform better on gymnastics? What are their strength numbers going to look like? Is the stress going to impede their training to the point of they're not improving? What's the injury risk like? So like, those are all kind of cost benefit analysis that you kind of have to play when you're starting to drop a bigger athlete down. And then, does the competition, do you need to be lighter for it? Like the open, for sure, definitely need to be lighter for it. Quarterfinals, maybe not as much,
right?
Especially depending on the one that you go to now. And the games is a toss up as well. Like, there's traditionally more running on it, but now that Dave's not out, like, who knows, you know? So it's like, it's kind of like a cost benefit analysis that you have to play. And like, I think there's a healthier range where you can sit at. Like, so my experience with it was in 2018, I cut down to 215 pounds. And in order to do that, I literally had to lose muscle mass. And I don't know necessarily that's the same experience with you, but my strength my strength numbers dropped drastically when I did that. And it wasn't, I had my best open finish, but if I were to go do something that required more power or higher power output, I would have tanked.
Sure.
And I wasn't doing a ton of lifting at the time. I was, just kind of doing a lot of aerobic, or a lot more CrossFit, under eating, more gymnastics type stuff. So my strength numbers tanked, but then as soon as I started doing more lifting again, I was literally in a week above 220. It took literally a week. And so I think that's kind of like something you have to like keep in mind. Now, what we did with you last year, you literally clean and jerk 255 at semifinals. So it seemed to be pretty beneficial for your training last year. But how did you feel like on the cut? Like,
last year, like last year's nutrition, like through the season, felt really good. Like I cut a little bit going into like the open quarterfinal, and this is the plan I'm hoping to stick to for this year too. Cut kind of open quarterfinals, and then after quarterfinals, when eyes are on semis, it's like maintenance, because at that point it's like you said, I want to be able to lift heavy, and I like want to feel good in my gymnastics movements. And last year, when I was right around 170, I still felt strong AF. And like my gymnastics were feeling really good.
Well, you hit 10 unbroken muscle ups for a PR during that time.
Yes, I did.
So your gymnastics were going up, and you clean and jerk 255, which was a PR at semifinals. And
so that's like, I think part of like your journey through nutrition is really listening to your body, because I've learned, like with the cut where the coach got me under 160, like there was a beneficial cut for me, just because I realized like that's too light. Like that's too light for me. I was same kind of thing. I could not lift. Like I was not like, and honestly, my gymnastics didn't even feel all that much better, because the volume that you could handle on it was like significantly less. My energy level was so low because I wasn't getting enough food. And so like, so I've found for myself, like anywhere between like 165, 175, I feel really good performance wise. So, it's just kind of learning those things about your body too. And like, you kind of sometimes have to cut a few times to figure that out, but So like, last season I felt great. So I'm hoping to kind of follow that same thing this season,
Right.
cut into quarters. And then after quarterfinals, just fuel that body for performance and competition.
Yeah. And so like, I guess kind of bringing it back to the weight set point, like it appears, and apologies if this is wrong, but it appears that Amanda is like at her weight that she wants to be cut to right now. What do you think would happen to you if you were at your cut weight now and trying to maintain that throughout the season? Does that make sense?
No.
So like, let's say you were at 170 pounds now or something, or 165 pounds now. How would that affect you going through the season? Because it's already like kind of a stress being at that weight.
I get what you're saying.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know, because I never went through a season at that weight. Like, it'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of this season. Because I've already talked to my nutrition coach, being like, after the season, I tend to like to not have to track all of my food, because it's such a mental thing too.
I mean, this is something we literally just talked about. It's like, maybe just get a coach for the season.
So and like, I mean, she had a really good response to that, kind of talking about how, you know, the things she's kind of seen two different types of successful athletes. The all or nothing athlete, where like they restrict all year round, all the time. They never give themselves like any like joy in their food. Like after competition, they might have one treat or indulge in one thing, but then they're like right back at all or not, like, you know, there's that. But then there's also the athlete that's like, they enjoy the things they want to enjoy all year long. And then after competition, they might take a day or two to whatever, but then they like get right back on it. Obviously the latter sounds a little healthier for both like mental and everything. And so she had a good rebuttal with that, being like, basically sounded like she was like, I'd like you to keep tracking after competition, but like we'll be a little looser in the tracking kind of thing, which does make sense.
For sure.
But for me, it's just like having that mental break of not having to weigh my food and like track everything perfectly and everything like that. For me personally, that just, I think that works best for me. Because like you said, like, I don't necessarily, I guess I did say to my coach, I don't want to necessarily have a 10-pound weight gain after the season, maybe 5, you know, because I don't want to sit at 165, 170 all
and just
year.
Be stressed, like,
because I think my body, like, they would come to the point where it, like, I would be like plateauing in the gym. I like, your body needs that natural ebb and flow.
For sure.
Like, especially if you're looking to compete. Because like, you're going to go through strength cycles where you can't be the leanest you've ever been if you're trying to go through a strength cycle. You've got to go through these. It's like you do cycles with training. You do kind of have to do those cycles with nutrition, and with like, it's natural for your body to
ebb and flow
10 to 15 pounds, maybe, you know? So.
So you think for you, it'd be more like, it wouldn't so much be the performance aspect of being at 165. Like, you think you could handle that? It would just be more so like the mental.
I think so. Of like having to stay there. Because like, there does come a point where it's like, I don't want to worry about what's on the scale as long as I feel good here.
We're fine.
Awesome. Like, even if that happens to be at 180, like, you know, as long as I feel good. But it's like, again, as soon as I start feeling heavy, it's like, all right, let's pull it back a little bit. I think I'm probably in the opposite boat of that, where like, if I get down to 225, the amount of cutting and like just natural muscle mass that I have to lose to get down there, I think is super stressful on my body. So like, for me, it's like, yes, I fucking hate tracking food. It's annoying as fuck. But it's not so much that as it is like, I just like the stress of being at that weight. Like, when I'm in a deficit, and like, in order for me to almost stay at that weight, I would have to almost be in a deficit. Because anytime I start to creep up into like slightly above maintenance, it's like, boom, weight gain. Like, literally went from 215 to over 220 in a week. Like, so like,
yeah, so like the stress of being at that and then trying to maintain that is like super hard on my body. So like whenever, I don't know about you, but my experience, like when I'm in deficit, I'm waking up for an hour or two in the night, like just starving. Like it's not fun, but like, and I need a lot more coffee. Like it's not the most enjoyable thing in the world, but I do know that when I am down at 225, my gymnastics are then comparable for the sport. So I guess that's kind of like where we differ a little bit, is more the mental clarity versus the actual being down at that weight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, mine's definitely more of like a mental stress thing versus a physical stress.
For sure.
Yeah. Because like I definitely feel like for me to go like at this point 180, I would like to be down to like 170, 165 maybe by quarterfinals.
Yeah.
And because I don't feel like I actually lose a ton of strength or a ton of muscle mass when I
mean, I mean, your numbers last year would indicate that was not the case.
Right.
You know, like like the fact that you got stronger throughout the year last year would indicate that was not the case.
And so mine's definitely more of like a mental stress than it is a physical stress.
Yeah. And I think that's probably too where we differ, is like I legitimately, so like granted, this is like bod pod, so I haven't done like super accurate weighing, but anytime that I've gotten a body fat percentage test, I've never been over 8.5%, I think is
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So literally for me to lose weight, I have to lose muscle mass.
Yeah.
There's not like a lot
of fat to lose on that body, apparently.
Apparently not. Which again, I think body fat is more genetic than it is anything else. So so like again, that I think to actually break down protein or muscle fiber is a super stressful way to lose weight. And like that is the body's last form of breaking down energy as a last resort, you know? So like for you to get into that point and try and do it quickly, like not gradually over time, where you're just not lifting weights anymore, I think is where my stress comes from inside of like trying to cut, if that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense, because I just got a DEXA scan done, which again, grain of salt with all those things.
All of it,
but I was at 22% body fat.
Okay.
So like, there's a little bit of body fat could be lost in my cut.
Yeah.
Which means that I will be able to maintain that muscle for the most part.
Yep.
The thing with me too is like some coaches I've had in the past, nutrition coaches, when I talk about cutting, they're like, well, to do this, you're going to have to lose muscle mass and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, for me personally, obviously, everybody is different. For me, it's like I can afford to lose a little bit of muscle mass,
for sure,
because my strength numbers are so high within the sport.
Yep.
That like if I
especially on the team side of things,
especially on and so like if I lose 5 pounds on my clean or whatever, like I'm still going to be
still a first place finish.
Right. I'm still going to be in the top numbers for strength. So it's like me personally, I given again, based off my body composition at 22% body fat, there is,
in theory, there's like 7%, like where women tend to fall into like that 15% range, 17% range. There's like 5 to 7% body fat you could lose.
I could lose, which would most likely be the most of the weight I want to lose.
Right.
So it's like, so then I don't have to lose. Like, and I think that's one thing that some coaches don't, or some people in general don't tend to take into account when you talk about a cut, is like, the difference is the body composition, because like you said, you don't have fat to lose, so you have to lose the muscle. Right. And I do have some fat, or not that I have to lose it, but there's fat that could be lost.
The difference is in like losing the weight. It's like you can lose like losing
fat weight versus muscle weight.
Yeah. Like you have a little bit more to lose that doesn't necessarily come from a fuel standpoint or performance standpoint for the sport, the sport of CrossFit specifically. Not endurance sports.
Yes.
Where like mine comes from like a legitimate performance standpoint that I have to lose from. Yeah. So and one thing that I think that we did pretty well with you was last year was to get you stronger was we actually kept some of your lifting in 2 to 3 times a week. And even now, like that's kind of what we're doing. It's like your Mondays are super aerobic based. Tuesdays are like kind of some CrossFit with some EMOM work. Wednesdays we have you lift. I'm trying to think, what were you doing Fridays this last cycle? Disclaimer, I write for like 30 programs, so
I should remember. We were just preparing for TFX, so that's what I have in my brain.
Yeah.
Fridays you had me doing like odd object stuff.
Yeah, there's a strongman day.
Yeah, strongman day.
So that was kind of
like I would always lift before that.
Okay, so another lifting day, and then our Saturdays, for the most part, were just like 3 CrossFit sessions.
Pretty much, yeah.
So
sometimes we lift, sometimes we don't.
So we had you lifting 3 times a week, or 2 times a week, maybe a third day a week, and you literally just PR'd your power snatch by 10 pounds today.
Yep. And the heaviest I've snatched in the last probably couple months was at TFX with the 155 pound snatch.
10 singles, baby.
Yeah.
Plus the warm up reps, I guess.
Oh yeah. But other than that, like, yeah, I haven't been like snatching heavy.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. So I think like if you are cutting, like, there's still lifting that you have to put in there from a central nervous system standpoint.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be like every day, if that makes sense. Because like, for example, like people like me, I hypertrophy super easy. So if I'm lifting literally every single day, I'm never going to lose the muscle mass that I need to lose. Right. We did, and thankfully I had gone through a cut, so we knew that with you.
Yeah.
So we put you at 2-ish, 3-ish days a week of lifting. So I think that is one thing that we did really well with you is like we've seen your strength numbers continue to rise with only 2 to 3 days of lifting a week. And I think that's one thing, like if you are a more powerful athlete and you're worried about losing your strength numbers on a cut, literally if you just give your body that central nervous system touch of your heavier lifts. And like, for me, it doesn't have to be a lot of reps. Like if I'm building to a tough triple, if I'm building to a 3x3, if I'm doing a tough single, like those will allow me to elicit a really good central nervous system response inside of lifting. So for example, in 2018, I cut down to 215. In 2020, apparently we have some psychotic control about weight loss when like lockdowns happen, because
like I said, there was so much out of everybody's control, and that's one thing you can control.
Yeah.
So it's like you just felt like you had to take control of something.
Yeah. I think mine just happened to be like a natural, like naturally I did it. Because I started walking a lot more during that time, which is like Amanda Barnhart made a comment on this about walking, and like it is 100% like legit like the best exercise you could do if you're trying to stay healthy. So I think naturally I just fell into that, and I actually cut down to like 225, 227 from like 232, 235 range. So I was down to that, and I ended up squat cleaning 325 at the time, which was only 10 pounds off of my lifetime PR with that minimal of strength training. So I think if you're, it probably helped that I was like a little bit older in the sport too, and had the like central nervous system touches from almost a decade at that point in time of fucking CrossFit. So that probably had some help with it. And like, to be honest, like I don't think you should look at adjusting your weight at all until you are trying to find the like 1% improvements in your sport, which is way later in your career, 5-6 years into the career. But yeah, I think that's another thing that people, guys especially, seem to just be so afraid of like losing their lifts. Have you had like seen that at all, or like? I
mean, that makes sense.
Yeah,
the guys are all bold, lifting heavy.
Yeah, which like I've always been like, all right, like it's cool, but okay, like I'd rather be standing on top of a podium, you know?
Yeah, well, I guess like that could be kind of like a difference because I think women are more about like the aesthetic of it.
Yeah,
you know,
where
like especially you look at all the top athletes, they're all shredded with their like weird six packs and
weird.
I mean weird. Some of them maybe, I don't know.
Freak.
with their six packs and like all that stuff, and like that's what people like think that a woman in CrossFit has to look like, you know.
Okay, yeah.
Like from like when I think of as a woman from like the woman's standpoint, where
yeah.
like men really like they want to be the strongest, the fastest, the whatever, and so like women cut for I feel like aesthetic purposes, and guys like cut, but they like are afraid because they don't want to lose.
Yeah, it's almost like because like in a like probably like take that back to like evolutionary like physiology, right? Like the biggest guy brings back the most meat, gets the most chicks, right? So like
gets the most chicks.
I guess. So like that would make sense like why guys want to keep their performance levels higher, whereas like women want to like we know that visually like men go after like visual stimulation. So like that would make sense from like an evolutionary standpoint, but like it's weird that you can't decouple from that almost that thought process and be like, I want to win. What do I need to do to win? Like, and well, I guess I have to be lighter to win, you know? But I mean, I think it's a lot harder to do on the female side of things than it is the guy side of things, like the visual aspect, if that makes sense.
I think the most important thing that I think people miss a lot, because it's always like I feel like the narrative is just like, you know, cut to be lean and it's like if you're looking to be competitive in the sport, like it really just does come down to like knowing your body, because it like we've had the experience where it's like a lot of coaches I've had put me like, because I am a bigger athlete in the sport, like I can't eat the same way like a Faith can.
right.
For those who don't know, Faith is a tiny little lean shredded thing that like, trains with us.
5'2", like
I
think like 100. She did like 120 pounds the other day because she started losing weight because she was training more. Just like not fathomable.
She literally was like, I leaned out on accident and I was like, that would be nice.
Yes, but, same. I leaned up.
So it's like, you know, Faith and I have very different nutrition needs. Like you can't feed me like you feed Faith, and you can't feed Faith like you feed me. So I think it's really just like learning your body and what feels the best for you.
For sure.
And like knowing where those things, like if we're talking specifically weight on the like number on the scale, like knowing where those like where you feel the best for terms of like if you're looking to compete. And
I almost feel too like nutrition is way more of a journey than like fitness is, if that makes sense. Because like everybody is so different, and it takes so much longer to figure out what works for you, and you have to like keep trying things too. Whereas like fitness, like for the most part, if you were to throw a good athlete into any program, they'll see adaptation for a pretty substantial amount of time. Whereas like now that it also isn't the case for some people, but nutrition is like, all right, I'm going to try this cut. Okay, this worked for me from a psychological standpoint. This didn't work for me from an actual food consumption standpoint. And there's like so many more variables that you have to try. And then you do get into like, okay, should I have a nutrition coach for 6 months, just the season, and then not care about it for as much for 2 to 3 months? Like, do I need that break? Do I try and just, hey, this is 10 years of my life. Fuck it. I'm going to try it and be strict about it for, 10 years. Like there's so much like give and play that you have to like learn about more in nutrition. And especially if you're an athlete who doesn't necessarily sit at the weight that some of these other competitors sit at, is like, it seems like it's more of a journey than, than the nutrition or the lifting side or performance side. Sorry.
Absolutely. Because like I've worked with multiple different people, and they've all been great in their own ways. And like some things I don't like about some of them, like that sort of thing. But like, it really has been over the last, I would say 2 years for sure.
Yeah.
I've really started to learn, like, I mean, because that's when I really started focusing on being competitive.
Right.
Was within the last 2-3 years. So that's when I've really started to focus in on like what actually feels the best for me. Not just like, okay, I'm gonna cut. Okay, now I'm just gonna hang out. Right. Okay, I've like gained a little fluff. I'm gonna cut again. Because that's what I was doing. Like when I was like just doing CrossFit.
Right.
You know, it's just like, oh, I feel a little fluffy. I'm gonna cut a little bit. Like, you know, but now that it's like, where do I actually feel good?
It's funny because I think this is like back in 2012, 2013. Like I was like 200 pounds back then. Like when I started CrossFit, I was I was like 195, and I actually could see some of my abs. And so some days I'd wake up and I'd like go after like binge eating McDonald's or some dumb shit. Like I'd go and be like, oh, can't see my abs today. Better do some more GHDs today. I'd literally go and do GHDs, and then like the next day, like my quote unquote see my abs, you know. Yeah. So I totally understand that aspect of it. And then like eventually it got to the point where it's like, okay, well now I'm just like putting on size. Like what's going on? Well, I've always put on size in CrossFit, but it was like, what in the world is going on here? Like, how do I slow this down or stop this?
Right. Yeah.
One of the other things that I think you had mentioned before was like, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing on the cut. Like,
I think that's one, like, so many people have this thought that it's like, okay, I'm going to cut for however long. I can't cheat at all. I have to cut out all this stuff. And when and once I get down to where I want to get down to, then I can whatever.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in balance at all times. And like, it's so not true. Like it is not all or nothing on a cut. Like obviously if you're all or nothing, you'll get where you want to go faster, but it's again, for me, it's such a psychological thing. It's such a mental thing. It's like, enjoy the, like, I'll use last night as the example, like enjoy the things you want to enjoy. Like
salad and French fries.
Right. I was eating a salad and French fries for dinner because I went to a thing with some friends right after training and I needed food. And then I was like craving something sweet. And so I got home and we had some Thin Mints. So I had like half a sleeve of Thin Mints. And I was like, okay, I'm probably going to be a little heavier tomorrow, but like, well, it is what it is. But like, I was not heavier. I technically like half a pound lighter, but like basically right where I was at.
Right.
But that was really like the only splurge I've had all week. Like if you're doing that once a week, it's not gonna deal. Like obviously I can't do that all day every day.
Right.
But
once a week for like one meal. Like,
once a week for one, like that's okay. And it's like it's not gonna derail everything.
Yeah.
And like again, no, I can't do that every meal every day because then I'm not gonna go anywhere. But like it's okay to enjoy the things you enjoy, just making sure you're doing it not every day and in moderation. Like,
right.
It's just, it's such, again, for me personally, that just helps with the mentality and the mental piece of a cut.
It's not like, hey, this is being taken away from me. It's like, hey, I'm going to forego this pleasure now so that I can have the greater benefit of pleasure later from my accomplishment later on.
Yeah. And I mean, I honestly have the mentality that if I have a nutrition coach that's like, you can't eat that, I'll be like,
watch me.
Like, I don't do well with being told, like being restricted. I don't.
Oh, I can't.
Oh, really?
Because this is going in my mouth right now.
Or like, you shouldn't drink that. Like, you shouldn't have this. You should have this instead. Like, well, like I'm very much like, don't tell me to restrict because like restriction it leads to unhealthy eating habits. And like, I luckily have had like not a whole lot of issues with that. But I'm kind of a person that if somebody pushes me too much and is like, you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have this, then I'm like, well, I'm going to have all of it. Goodbye. So, you know, so it's just like, again, finding the balance and knowing that.
Also, that kind of goes back to the point of like, it's a journey. Like you had to find that out, you know?
Right. Because some people like can restrict themselves for a little bit of time. It doesn't become unhealthy. And like, that's really great.
Yeah.
And like, again, I can restrict myself I don't develop unhealthy like relationships or habits or anything like that, but I just choose not to do that because for me, it feels better to be like, instead of being like, oh, I can't have that because I'm on a cut. It's like, I can have. I'll have half of what I would normally eat, or I'll have like, okay, I'll have it tonight. That just means I can't have it tomorrow, or like whatever. It's just like, it's kind of like a choose your battles thing when it comes to a cut. It's like, you can have this now and then just realize you might not be able to have it later in the week if you're going to actually reach the goals you want to reach. Right. But it's like, because again, not every day, but once a day. Great. Great. Yeah. Or I said not every day, but once a day. Not every day, but once a week.
Once a week. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a choose your battles. Like I said to you, my nutrition coach currently doesn't have me hitting specific numbers. She was like, just eat for the week, track everything you eat, and then we'll kind of look at it and go from there, find some numbers, whatever. And like, even just that, having that extra accountability, like throughout the week, I noticed myself like, I really wanted to snack because I love snacking. I actually had a conversation with people the other day that I'm like, if I could literally just eat snack food all day and like not have to eat meals,
would be so awesome.
That'd be so great because I love snacking. But I found myself throughout the week, like I really wanted to snack, but it was like, I don't actually need that. I'm either not actually hungry or I'm not like I don't need that. I can like go get some water or like whatever. Like, it's just kind of having that accountability of somebody for me at least. It's like, okay, I'm not actually that hungry. I can wait for dinner. Like,
I think one big thing that CrossFitters, especially because it's a lot of type A personalities get into CrossFit. One thing that they struggle with immensely is, oh, I fucked up. It's time to fucking totally abandon this. It's all or nothing. Like, I had donuts today. I'm going to have donuts for the rest of this week. Screw it. And I was like, I think with dieting or like cutting or whatever you want to call it, maintenance, whatever, like you have to be gracious with yourself. Like we're humans. We're going to fuck up. Nothing is ever perfect in life. No matter how hard you try, like you could always be better at something. Always. So like, if you do end up like eating out 2 days in a row when you weren't planning on doing it, or eating, higher levels of sugar than you were planning for a couple days in a row, like recognizing that, like, okay, I did that. It's in the past. It's no longer a thing. Like, I still have these goals. I'm still progressing towards these goals. It's time to get back on the train, back on the bandwagon, and start fresh today with making progress towards those goals. And I think that's where a lot of people fall off the wagon, is like literally going all or nothing.
I've definitely been there. For sure. Even just like in a day, it's like, oh, well, I had a cinnamon roll and whatever for breakfast, so might as well just have whatever I want today.
There goes the day.
Count today as a loss. And like, that's not like, if you want to have a cinnamon roll and whatever for breakfast, awesome. And then
just
eat
normally
the rest of the day. You don't have to restrict yourself the rest of the day. You don't just eat normally. And like, it's one day.
Just try and keep the habits as much as possible. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I've definitely been there where it's like, well, I amped up. Here we go.
There's the Cheetos cheese puffs. Let's go.
Cheese puffs.
For anybody out there, this has been a question that's been going around. How many bags of Cheeto cheese puffs do you think you could eat before you were just like, okay, I'm good?
Like, I've had enough Cheetos.
Yeah. Not just like,
not like you're full, not like whatever. Like, you're just like, I'm good. Like, I don't need any more.
I think you could eat 3 bags.
I could eat so many Cheetos.
So many.
I had to stop myself eating the Cheetos when we were at the Airbnb at T-Fax on Sunday. I was like, Jamie was like, you can take those with me. And I'm like, no. Because I will. It's a family size bag, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who's eaten out of it.
We had our own. Yeah. So you're the only one who got that one. That's funny. So yeah, if anyone has an answer to that question or has done that before,
comment below.
For real. Please reach out.
We so want to know.
Curious. So tangent aside, the other thing I think that for like bigger athletes, more powerful athletes, they need to not eat as much protein as is mostly prescribed by people. So I think if you look back at when people started to get big into nutrition in CrossFit, they just started following the bodybuilder's diet, and it was literally a gram of protein per body weight. And so you ate like an absurd amount of protein. Like I was 225 pounds eating 225 grams of protein. Not pounds of protein. That's what I'm fucking gonna say. Grams of protein. And when I did my first cut, and this is honestly what I've been doing since then, is I went to like 150 or 160 grams of protein a day at 220, 30-ish pounds. I was eating 230 grams of protein, dropped down to 150, 160. That actually helped me lose some muscle mass in order to get down to 215. Yeah. I also felt way better, which was crazy. Like I didn't feel like my body was clogged up. Like like it didn't feel like I had oil running through my veins. If anyone feels like that, or if that makes sense to anybody. That could have been a multitude of things. I think I actually started eating some vegetables at that point in time too. Look at that. But that was, I think, one thing that was like a huge misconception. I think it's still a huge misconception, is you don't have to eat your body weight in grams of protein, especially if you are taller, bigger, more powerful, more muscle mass. Have more muscle mass athlete, or your stress adaptation is to put on muscle mass or hypertrophy. Like the last thing you want to do is give your body more fuel to do that. And I think there's an insulin factor that plays into that as well. I know that when I start lifting more, I crave soda like it's freaking cool. Yeah. Like I crave it. And then insulin has been linked to weight gain. It might even be linked. Well, it is linked to muscle mass. Like a lot of bodybuilders inject insulin to hypertrophy. But I think that goes along with kind of like the stress response of like being like, hey, we need to put on size because we're lifting stuff. Also high intensity with CrossFit, like you probably just crave glucose. But if you could give yourself more carbs without the high dose of like a soda or something like that, probably a little bit better. So that was like a hormone tangent. Sorry. But yeah,
the protein thing for sure. Yeah, because that's where I actually, because with my Fitness Pal, like you can go back in time to like, I remember I've like looked, because like if you go back to a date, it has, if you've been tracking macros at that time, if they're different from what you're tracking now, it is still at the numbers.
Okay.
That kind of thing. You hear what I'm saying? So there was a time when I went back to see in different cuts.
Oh yeah.
How much protein I was eating.
Yeah.
And I definitely like the cuts where I had not a pound of a gram of a pound. We're at the pound. A gram of protein per pound of body weight. The ones that like my protein was lower than my body weight. Like those cuts were definitely more successful.
For sure.
For me, who I have a crap ton of muscle mass already.
Right. Right.
You know, so it's like, so yeah, I definitely, those were the cuts that were
most successful. Yeah. Yeah. And then it ties back into making sure that you're getting the central nervous system touches on your lifts so that they don't go down. Don't go down significantly.
Right.
Like more than likely they probably will go down. I think you are just a crazy anomaly to that. Like whether it's like your training age or what, like I don't know, but I think you're a little bit of an anomaly to that. Like more than likely your lifts will go down a little bit. You might be an anomaly like Manda. Maybe the 2 times a week is enough to get you stronger. I don't know. That's kind of like, that would be part of your nutrition / fitness journey that you would have to find out.
I'm also at the very beginning of this cut this season. I wasn't this heavy at the beginning of last season. So like there is a chance, like we don't know what this season's actually going to look like.
Totally. But
I would be surprised if my strength numbers went down a ton.
Right. So like there like more than likely you are going to, especially if you are like have been in the sport for a significant amount, like 6+ years, I would say, in the sport, not just in training, but the sport. You're probably going to see some of your numbers drop, but like the goal is to drop them as little as possible, where you're only losing 5, 10, maybe 15 pounds on your lifts versus like what I did, where I went from a 400-pound front squat to like barely touching 335. Yeah. That was my first cut. Whoops. Whoops. Oh, you do have to lift weights. Okay. But yeah, I think that was like another big thing was,
again, the journey, and like you had to learn what works for you. I've had to learn what works for me.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Is there anything else we talked about?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think we've covered most of everything we're planning to cover.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Walking is beneficial. I'll always hit on that.
He walks like 4 miles a day.
Nah, not anymore. I was walking 4 miles. Yeah, during my cut. It was, well, I guess unintentional cut, but yeah, whatever. But thanks for listening, guys. Hopefully you got some insight out of this, especially if you're if you are the individual who's a little bit bigger in the sport, stronger, powerful, need a little bit of like help on the like what do I do side of things. Like hopefully this gives you a little bit of experience for that, a little bit more of a framework, learning from kind of like what we've gone through, like, at least the last 2 years, because it is like kind of an uncharted territory, like especially with each individual is a little bit uncharted when it comes to that. So so thanks for listening. Hopefully this helps out. If you guys could, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button and the subscribe button for the algorithm. Follow Amanda on Instagram at
Amanda_thighs.
And if you follow us on Instagram, if you don't already, that'd be sweet. If you're listening on Spotify, you can always follow us on YouTube as well. Put out some content there. So thanks, guys. I'm going to awkwardly get up and shut the video off now.
Because we don't know. We need a button.
Yeah, for real.
Bye.